Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the CFR training webinar for the 2021 fiscal year consolidated fiscal report. We are starting to get the hang of these webinars, so we hope you find it very helpful when completing this year's CFR. We've had pretty good feedback the last couple of webinars and hope to continue on that trend. We have a pretty good sized crowd today. It's supposed to be around 500 attendees spread throughout all the different agencies that require CFR. So hopefully we don't have any issues with WebEx. We do have good news. SED started participating in the webinars for the 2020 calendar year and will be present at these trainings going forward. So that means we'll be presenting information regarding SED programs and be able to address any SED questions. Also, as done with the previous trainings, these webinar sessions will be recorded and posted online. We will send an email out to all the providers notifying them of when they're available and where they can be found. My name is Ken Glenmeyer. I work for OPWDD, and I will be the host of the two webinars we have scheduled this week. Today's panelists will be as follows. OASAS will be Paul Green and Paul Sutton. OMH will be Ann Hoffman, Michelle Chilinsky, and Kathy Katz. OPWDD will be Francis Vasilio, Alpa Amin, and myself. SED will be Jahida Benamtar, and Department of Health will be Jeffrey Nickerson. Also, we have a survey that will pop up at the end of the event. We would greatly appreciate you taking the time to fill out the survey so that we could continue to make these trainings better for you guys. Session one will cover the following: getting started with the CFR, time to do the CFR, and then also core reporting, so the CFR 1 through DMH 1 schedules. So this is important. We strongly encourage all attendees to ask questions through the Q&A function in the webinar. It's on the right-hand side, and you might have to click the arrow next to the Q&A to open the dialog box. If you don't see it, you might have to click the three little dots at the bottom of the WebEx and then click Q&A. We will not be answering questions today, but we plan on answering all the questions and posting answers online, along with the recording of this webinar so that everyone could get the benefit of the webinar and the questions asked. This is always good to know. This slide shows how to contact each agency. Some of us are still working remote, so all the agencies prefer email contact. Also, to be noted, New York State Office of Children and Family Services may submit questions regarding the CFR submission to the OMH CFR unit. Any claim questions could go to the following. As noted on the previous slide too, this is the same circumstances. Emails would be the preferred method. By the end of this seminar, we hope to accomplish the following goals. We want to introduce providers to the CFR manual and the New York State Consolidated Fiscal Reporting Software. We want to provide New York State agency contact information for specific questions not covered during this training session. We want to help providers become more familiar with CFR core reports. And we also want to discuss important policies, principles, and rules regarding the completion of the CFR. I will now pass on to presenting to our first panelist.
Hello, my name is Francis Vasilio. I work for OPWDD in the CFR unit. The first step in doing your CFR is not to jump right into the software. The first step is to review, and if you're a newbie, to read the CFR manual. There are sections there for each of the core schedules that are the components of the CFR, also for the claiming schedules and the supplemental schedules. There are also numerous appendices with more detailed information. For instance, each state agency has their own appendix. Appendix G lists all the programs offered by OPWDD. It gives you information on what constitutes a unit of service, what to use as a site code, how to outlines what the program is all about. And even those of you who have done CFRs numerous times should review each of your programs to see if there's been any change there in units of service and so forth. These manuals are available at the New York State Ed website, and I'll give you a picture of it here. This is what it looks like, and you can, if you get a letter asking you to revise something from a couple of periods ago, you can go in here and pull up the manual from several years back to review and to get the information you need in order to adjust your CFR. There are also, this is a place where you can get links to different things, the 30-day extension request, which applies to a couple of the agencies. The manual and the appendix, you can download these onto your own computer so that you can refer back to them. The CFR is used by all the state agencies for rate and fee setting purposes, for potential cost of living increases. It's used by the Office of the Governor, by the legislature, by DOB, and it's also, most important to many of you, the state aid claiming documents, the DMH schedules at the end, which are used to close out your contracts and get your final payments. When you're completing the CFR, if you're doing a full CFR, CFR 1 through 6, and the DMH1 must be completed on a full accrual accounting basis. The DMH2 and DMH3, you have options. You can do accrual, modified accrual, or cash basis. And if you're one of those lucky folks who's only doing a mini abbreviated CFR, then you have all those options, accrual, modified accrual, or cash for the entire CFR. When we say full accrual accounting, those of you who are not business or accounting majors in school, we mean that if you provide a service in June and you send the billing off to a MEDNY or to the state in July, and hopefully you get paid by August, that's all to be reported as June, the units of service, the revenue, and the expenses. So it's full accrual, and keep in mind then that the salaries, the payments to your employees are to be recorded not on the date of their paycheck, but rather by the date that they were earned by your employees. That means that the salary information you provide in the CFR, in CFR-4 and 4A, is not going to match up with the quarterly and annually filed reports with the state and federal government for payroll. There are 4 types of CFRs. There are full CFRs, abbreviated Article 28 CFRs, abbreviated and mini abbreviated CFRs. What kind of CFR you're required to report depends on the type of programs that you operate and the amount of funding you receive. The Section 2 of the manual includes a series of matrices, and you go through and you answer the questions and follow the arrows, and you'll find out what kind of CFR you're required and whether or not your CFR has to be certified by an accountant. The one thing that you have to keep in mind is if for this is a picture of the matrix, one of the matrices. If you are required by any of the state agencies that fund you to file a full CFR, then you're going to be doing a full CFR for all the state agencies. Also, the thing to remember is that the reporting period that we're covering is for July 1st to June of 21. It's very similar to the calendar CFR, and it's based on usually where the headquarters of your organization is located. So most of you who are participating in this training are probably have a headquarters that's based in New York City. And all the programs that you operate are going to be included in this one CFR. You don't do a different CFR for each state funding agency. Or if you're just doing minis, you don't do a different CFR for each contract that you have. I've had those come in too. Some lucky few of you are actually going to get to do this more than once a year. In that case, you may be headquartered in New York City. Most of your operations may be there, but you may have a program operating in Nassau County, in which case you're going to have to file a secondary submission so that your contract with the Long Island DDRO can get completed. In that case, usually, but not always, you're able to file that secondary submission as a mini abbreviated submission. Due dates. For OMH and SED, the due date for your June 30th CFR is going to be November 1st. Now you can file for an automatic 30-day extension to bring it to December 1st, which is also the date that OASAS, OPWDD, DOH, and OCFS have set for their CFR submissions. Now, there are no extensions beyond December 1st, unless there's a hurricane or something like that. And you, as the person who's doing the CFR, have to have a plan in place long before those deadlines get here. You have to be speaking with your billing folks and the people who run your programs to arrange that you can get the information you need from them in a timely manner. You have to make sure that your ledger is all set and ready to go off to your CPA for your financial statements. You have to give time for the financial statement to come back and get to your board of directors for approval so that it can be finalized. And you have to get your CFR to your CPA in case it has to be certified in time for them to do their reviews and get back, because all of that documentation is due by the deadline. The CFR, the certifications, and the financial statement. There are penalties if you do not file on time. I think each state agency will cover their penalties in more detail when we get to those sections tomorrow. But for OASAS, there are fines for OMH. I saw where there's 20% on withholding on Medicare payments. We're pretty serious about these penalties. And the people who are most serious are OPWDD, because we got pressured from the federal government. And for us, if you miss your deadline, you can be subject to a 2% of all your Medicaid billings until the end of the month in which you come into compliance. And unlike some of the other agencies, we don't refund the money. And since the federal government said that if an agency that's receiving their money hasn't filed by August 1st, and they're going to withdraw their support through Medicaid for that agency, and since half the Medicaid money comes from the federal government, if you haven't filed all your information by February 1st, then on August 1st, we're going to cut your rates for reimbursement rates by 50%. And that will likely put you out of business. So please take the penalties and the deadline seriously and have a plan in place to meet all your requirements. SED also has penalties. As I said before, they're going to get into the details of those in the SED section tomorrow. If you do file for an extension, you should, and you're also funded through an LGU contract with New York City, you should touch base with the people who approve your contract and let them know that you filed for the extension. It should be no problem, but don't take anything for granted. Submission requirements. You have to use the software that's available through the OMH website for download. There's no charge. You use it to file the CFR or complete the CFR, and there's a function in there that allows you to do the upload through the internet. That same program allows you to upload financial statements, parent agency allocation data, and certification pages. And that's the preferred method that we'd like to receive your CFR and all the supporting documentation. Some of the agencies will continue to accept the certifications by email. The DOH and OCFS will not. Those of you who have the printout, you will see addresses there where CFRs can be sent. I know financial statements have to be received as in digital format. And this is really a benefit for you because if you're funded by more than one state agency and you do the upload, that will be automatically transmitted to each of the state agencies. Now, you may still have to provide information separately to a regional office to close out a contract, but this way you don't have to send to different CFR offices in Albany. When you revise a CFR, you are always required to send a new CFR-i to all the state agencies who receive the CFR. Even if it's just a revision you're making for OPWDD, that same revised CFR is going to go to, say, OASAS, and they're going to need the CFR-i as well. SED and OASAS also may require a CFR-II or IIIA for the revisions. You may have to, if you're using a revised CFR at some point for rate setting, have to provide a II for OPWDD. But generally speaking, make sure you always at least send the CFR-i in and upload it. That way it'll follow the CFR to all the state agencies. If you are emailing a CFR certification page, we have some preferred ways we'd like you to name the file that you're sending us so that it can be we can slide it into our library for references. Those appear on the screen. Financial statements. You only submit financial statements once per reporting period. So no matter how many times you're required to revise the CFR, we only need the financial statement once. You only need to submit a financial statement a second time for a period if there were changes made by the CPA due to some late developing information. You're required to have this CPA or to have the financial statements. Most of you probably have to file financial statements with CHAR in addition to with CFR. Never give us draft financial statements. They're not of any use to us. We're getting an increasing number of copy-protected financial statements and CFR-ii's from the CPAs. They send them to you copy-protected. You send them on to us that way. That makes it difficult for us to move them and file them away. So please make sure that you let your CPA know that that's not what you need. You need a clean copy, digital format that you can upload and send along. It's preferred that your financial statement match your CFR reporting period, but we know that's not always the case. If your CFR reporting period ends June 30th of 21, then you have to have a financial statement that ends between July 1st of 2020 and June 30th of 2021. I ran into a couple people last week who thought they had to send their 2021 financial statement with their 2021 CFR, but that wasn't the case. So, or with their calendar 20 CFR. So, if you have a financial statement, it has to end during this period or at the end date. As I mentioned before, the CFR is available for download from the OMH website. It's free of charge. Your accountants may download it. You could have different people in your office download it, although that can create some difficulties. It's not really meant to work on a server to have people get into it. Sometimes there's problems when people try to do that. Generally speaking, it works on PCs a lot better than any Apple product. So those are things to keep in mind. If, when you try to download the CFR, you're having difficulties, these are the people who write the program and are the computer tech guys. That's who you should reach out to. There's a very limited amount that I can help you with as far as the computer to get around. We're having an increasing number of difficulties because of all the anti-spyware, and malware protections that people are putting on their computers, and sometimes that interferes with the way the CFR program works. So for that reason, we're in development of a web-based CFR where you will log in and do all this instead of downloading. So probably by the time you do your next CFR after this one, you'll be working that way. If you wait till the final days to get your CFR downloaded, the latest version of the program, and you're having difficulty and you reach out, you may have trouble getting a quick response because everybody who waits to the last minute overloads the process here. One little trick, if you download it, it looks like it's on there and you've got the icon on your desktop, but it won't open. If you right-click and choose Run as Administrator, that'll usually work unless your helpful IT people in-house have prohibited you to function as an administrator. The CFR software is very versatile. This one piece of software is going to give the information you need to report to 6 different state agencies. It knows if you've downloaded the latest version of the software, you'll be able to go back and work on a revision for an older CFR with no problem. The program knows which funding source codes and program codes were active for each reporting period. The software is updated twice a year, and once for the June 30 filers and once for the calendar year filers. If you're one of those lucky people who gets to report CFRs twice a year. The same software will allow you to do that. But you have to get the latest version. For instance, you'll need version 37 in order to do the June 30, 2021 CFR. And we expect that that should be released in October or by October, early October. And again, that may be the last version of the downloaded software that we produce. Document control number. This is really just a file number that gets assigned after you've completed the CFR. You go through a process in the utilities function of the CFR software, and it does a quick check for some obvious problems in the way you filled out the CFR, and you can click onto the error, that message that pops up, and it'll take you to where you can get in and make the changes that are necessary. Once you've completed all the corrections that the program tells you you have to make, it'll give you a document control number, a DCN, which is an 8-digit number that will appear then at the bottom of each page of your CFR and at the bottom of the certifications. And this is very important because a lot of people will complete the information in the certifications, which is the first steps as you go through the program, and then they'll immediately print those out. Well, there's no DCN assigned yet and not printed at the bottom. And if you send us signed certification pages that say not assigned at the bottom instead of the DCN, the file that you uploaded to us, then they're invalid. So you don't print the certification pages till the very end of the process. This is the OMH CFR webpage. You can see there that there's buttons for downloading the CFR manual. It'll take you there to SCD to get that, to download the software, to upload. When you go through the process for uploading, it'll take you to this page where you upload the CFR file to us. It comes up to the ITS computers at OMH, and then overnight it gets distributed to any of the other state agencies that are included in the CFR. Another important feature of that page is the CFR announcement list. It's very important that all of your agencies have at least 2 people's email addresses included in here, because this is the quick way we reach out to everyone to let them know, one, when the CFR program is ready, when version 37 is ready. There'll be a blast email out to everybody who's registered letting them know, so you don't have to call us every day and say, is the software ready? Is the software ready? Also, believe it or not, occasionally the state makes some errors and there might be a flaw in the program, and once people start working on it, they find something, report to us. In those cases, we may have to release a patch to the software. And once that patch is ready to go, we send a blast out to everybody who's registered their email address, and they know that they should go get that revised version of the software downloaded so that they don't go through the same hassles that the first people who found the problem went through. So 2 people at every agency, because one of you may hit lotto before next year and not be here, and we want somebody at your agency to be able to get our notes. In order to make this CFR process easy, we have some tips for you for your financial record keeping. Do your best to make sure that you've reconciled your general ledger on a monthly or quarterly basis, along with the payroll and fringe. If you've got staff that are splitting their time between different programs or different program sites, that should be tracked on an ongoing basis. It's a lot harder at the end of the 12 months to figure out where Joe Smith spent his time last March. So please track this and have it available in case you get audited. Check your expenses and revenues, especially your expenses. If you're operating a program that's done via a contract, it's a lot easier, and you see that your expenses are way beyond what you thought that the contract called for, the budget called for. It's a lot easier to get that budget modified before the end of the period than it is to go back after the end of the 12 months. So if you see 3/4 of the way through the year that you've already reached your max, it's a lot easier to get the budget modified so that you can get that extra funding for you operating the program. You should try to set up your ledger to track by program and by site whenever possible, so that it makes it a lot easier to pull the numbers for your CFR. You should also, the people who are going to give you the units of service, whether it's your budget or your billing folks or the program director, if they give you a number for units of service halfway through the year that doesn't look anything like the previous year, they may be reporting you hours instead of units or something like that, and you're going to want to double check with them and make sure you're both on the same page as to what a unit of service is. You should also be keeping track of non-allowable costs as you go through the year. Non-allowable costs are, in order for a cost to be allowable, reimbursable, it has to be reasonable, and it has to be for the direct benefit of the client. We have a list in Appendix F of the manual of examples of costs that may not be reimbursable, not allowable. The way it works is you go ahead and report those expenses in just so you can match your ledger, but then you back out the expense on a non-allowable line so that it doesn't get included in our totals when we're figuring out what to reimburse you for. Costs not properly related to patient care and for the diversion, amusement, or entertainment to owners, operators, and employees are not reimbursable. If you have a big holiday party at the end of the year for staff, not only are we not going to reimburse you for the booze, but if it's just for staff, that's not reimbursable. If it's a holiday party for staff and clients, that may be reimbursable. If you have fines, penalties, any kind of violation sanction, that's not reimbursable. Cost for training for staff that isn't directly related to their job isn't reimbursable. Related party transactions, we'll go through a lot of that when we cover Schedule CFR-5. Those are not reimbursable in certain circumstances. Anything beyond fair market value, or in the case of real estate, it gets more complicated, and as I say, we'll go through that with the section CFR-5. Fringe benefits, this is a biggie. Some of you may have special retirement plans just for your top executives. Any fringe benefit that's not applicable to all your employees is not reimbursable. So you go ahead and list the expense, but then you back it out as a non-reimbursable expense. If you've got a car that your executive director uses to drive to and from work, that's not reimbursable. If you've got a car that's used to travel around to different program sites, that is possibly, or at least the work portion of it would be reimbursable. And now I'm going to transfer you to Alpa Amin, who's our next presenter, and she's going to take you through some of the sections of the CFR.
Good morning. This is Alpa Amin from OPWDD. I will begin time to do CFR section. After downloading the NYS CFRS software, an icon is placed on the computer desktop, which will reflect CFRS 37.0 in the center of the icon. To open the software application, double-click on the icon. If there are problems opening the software, try right-clicking the icon and select Run as Administrator from the list of options. This is the first screen displayed when the NYS CFRS software has been opened. One of the 5 options available must be selected to continue. Make selection by clicking radio button to the left of option. We have selected to import data. Importing data saves time and ensures that all agency and program definition data remains consistent with the prior period. Click OK to proceed. This is the screen to import a CFR from a prior version of the CFR software. From the drop-down box, select the version of the software and highlight the file or browse to where the file is located. Select all data, which would include all agency and program site information as well as financial data, or master data only, which will include all agency and program site information without the financial data. Select Yes to the warning, and then select Import and close. If creating a submission of a different type and/or a different reporting period, check Change Submission Definition and update the necessary items at the bottom of the screen. Select Validate and then Import. The following are the steps of how to create a new submission. The information required for the new submissions are submission type, state agency, provider number, reporting cycle, and reporting period. The sample source selection of more than one NYS agency to choose from. User description is optional and is for personal identification purpose in submission directory. To complete your CFR, you will need the following information about your agency: legal name, 5-digit agency code assigned by NYS CFR agencies, street address of your agency's central administrative offices, county name where your agency's administrative offices are located, federal employer ID number of your agency, period covered by your agency's independently audited financial statements, name, phone number, and email address of your agency's CEO, President, Chair of Board of Directors, and the persons to contact with questions regarding cost report and claim schedule. The President, Chair of Board of Directors is not required for governmental or proprietary agency submission. On this screen, bolded field titles are required fields and data must be entered. The school code field is only used for providers submitting CFRs that include SED program. The period covered by providers' audited financial statements must be entered. Financial statement dates entered will determine whether CFR-II or CFR-IIA will be used for CPA certification. When using the import function, all data elements will be populated except certified financial statement reporting period. Click and save to proceed. You must create a program site before financial information can be entered. There are 4 choices: bring a program site forward from another submission, create a new program site, update an existing program site, and update a DMH-only programs. For presentation purpose, we will create a new program site. Program site definition information. To complete your CFR, you will need the following information about your agency's program site: the type of programs your agency operates, which NYS agency certifies and/or funds the program to be reported, the 4-digit program code and 2-digit index for each program site operated, the program site identification number for each program site operated. Please refer to the Section 8 of the CFR manual for more information about site code, the physical address for each program site operated, and the county in which each defined program site operates. This information can also be imported from another submission. To create a new program site, complete the required data and select Save. CFR maintain and create program site. To update an existing program site, highlight the row, make the change to the data, and select Save. If during the importing process, you receive an error code regarding a change to the program name, then from the Update a Program option, you should reselect the program to confirm the name change and satisfy error code. CFRS Navigation. Only the required schedules for the CFR submission type selected are displayed on CFR navigation screen. Certification Schedule. CFR-i, Agency Identification and Certification Statement, CFR-II or CFR-IIIA, Independent Accountant's Report, CFR-III, County NYC Certification Statement, CFR-iv, Supplemental Attestation Schedule. The certification schedules requiring data input will be listed first on the navigation screen. All CFRs do not require all certification pages. Refer to Section 2 of the CFR manual for exceptions to the requirements. Submission through the web page is the preferred method for submitting the certification and will be discussed in detail later in the presentation. CFR-i Agency Identification and Certification Statement. In the software, non-enterable fields are gray. On CFR-i, the information in the gray area has been carried forward from the agency definition screen. When importing master data, always verify that the imported data is still accurate and correct. All bolded field names are required. Accurate CEO and fiscal contact emails are especially important. Click Copy Contact if the CFR contact and the state aid claim contact person is the same. Click Save and/or select a different tab to proceed. CFR-i is required for all CFR submissions. The CFR-i must be signed by your Executive Director CEO. CFR-i schedule signed by anyone other than a noted party may not be accepted. CFR-i requires contact information for an agency's fiscal contact and president chair of the board of the directors. It should be uploaded via the CFRS upload page where it will be distributed accordingly to each NYS agency represented on the CFR. The schedule signed must have the same DCN as the CFR submitted. CFR-IIIA Accountant's Report. Complete all applicable fields and then click Save and/or select a different tab to proceed. CFR-III is required for most full CFR submissions. It should be signed by an independent certified public accountant, sole practitioner, partner of the CPA firm, or CPA firm that audited and certified the CFR. The CFR-IIIA should be uploaded via the CFRS upload page where it will be distributed accordingly to each NYS agency represented on the CFR. The signed schedule must have the same DCN as the CFR submitted. Appendix A of the CFR manual, please refer for the audit and examination guidelines. CFR-II or II-A will be printed based on the audited financial statement reporting period entered in the agency definition. CFR-II when the period covered by the general purpose financial statement corresponds to the CFR reporting period, and the CFR-II-A when the period covered by the general purpose financial statement differs from the CFR reporting period. Counties and other municipalities have three options for CPA certification of full CFR submission types: Schedule CFR-II, CFR-II-A, and compliance review. Refer to Appendix CC for more information on compliance review. CFR-III County New York City Certification Statement. Complete all applicable fields and then click Save and go to Proceed. CFR-III must be completed if aid to localities funding is received through a local county contract or a direct contract with a DMS state agency. If funded through a direct contract, the executive director CEO must sign the far left certification statement designated for voluntary local service provider. If funded through a local county contract, the far left certification must be signed by your executive director CEO, and the far right certification statement must be signed by the county director of community mental health services. CFR-III is not required for provider operating only rate-based and or unfunded programs. CFR-III County NYC Certification Statement. Counties must have the middle certification signed by the county treasurer and the far right certification signed by the director of community mental health services. CFR-III should be uploaded via the CFRS upload page, where it will be distributed accordingly to each NYS agency represented on the CFR. The schedule signed must have the same DCN as the CFR submitted. Do not wait for the county signature of the CFR-III prior to submission. Send a signed copy of CFR-III to the funding DMS state agency at the same time it is sent to the county. CFR-iv Supplemental Attestation Schedule. The CFR-iv schedule is required as a part of the full abbreviated or Article 28 abbreviated CFR submission for not-for-profit and proprietary providers submitting to OASAS, OMH, and OPWDD. The CFR-iv is a series of questions regarding the fiscal status of agency. CFR-iv schedule is used to report agency identifying data and serves as a certification statement by the service provider's chief executive officer attesting to the validity of the information contained in the document under the penalties prescribed in accordance with Article 175 of New York State Penal Law. The CFR-iv schedule is not required for SED-only CFR filers, governmental service providers, and many abbreviated CFRS. CFR Navigation Box. The CFR Navigation Box will appear highlighting the next recommended schedule to be completed. Schedule can be completed in any order. However, data will not be seen until the feeder schedule is completed. Then click Go to proceed. This concludes my section. Now I'm handing off to next speaker, Michelle.
Hi, good morning. This is Michelle Cholinsky at the New York State Office of Mental Health. Next, we'll be going over Schedule CFR-4 Personal Services. This schedule is a required schedule in all CFR submission types. There are 2 sections to complete in this schedule. Report the wages and salaries of employees working on your program in program administration or LGU administration in the first section. To complete the schedule, click the Add button, select the state agency, followed by the program and site from the drop-down menus. Click the Add button to select a position title code, followed by the standard work week. Then enter the hours paid and amount paid for the position title code on an annual basis, and the FTE will automatically calculate. Repeat this process until all position title codes have been entered, and then click the Save button. To the far right, you'll notice there are 3 additional columns. The amount paid and the FTE and hours paid are totaled for all programs by state agency. Next, complete the agency administration section of Schedule CFR-4. The wages and salaries of your executive staff and administration staff are reported using the position code of 600 series position title code. To complete this schedule, click the Add button, select the position title code, enter the standard work week, and enter the hours paid and amount paid on an annual basis. The FTE will automatically calculate. Staff that receive W-2s from your provider agency are considered to be employees. 100% of the amounts paid for agency administration staff must be reported on the schedule. A complete list of the position title codes that may be used for completing Schedule CFR-4 are located in Appendix R of the CFR manual. Select the position title code for which the description best matches the duties of your employee. Please note that some position title codes are limited to a specific New York State agency. In this example, position title code 211, volunteer coordinator, may only be used for an OASAS program. The position title codes are stratified in a 100 through 700 series. Take a particular note of the direct care staff 200 series and the clinical staff 300 series. These are used in OPWDD's rate rationalization process. Very important to accurately complete the position title codes for these 2 series. In addition, program administration staff are reported on the 500 series, agency administration staff on the 600 series, and local government unit staff are reported on the 700 level series. If there is a position title code that you would like to delete, simply highlight the row of data and click the Delete button, followed by the Save button. The standard work week must be between 35 hours and 45 hours. If an employee works in more than one program, their hours and salaries should be allocated between programs and or position title codes. The next slide shows the calculation of an FTE. An FTE is automatically calculated on Schedule CFR-4. In this example, we have a part-time employee that works 22.5 hours per week for 40 hours out of the year, which totals 900 hours worked for the year. That is divided by the total hours for the full-time position of 1,820, which is calculated by taking the total hours for the week of 35 and multiplying that by 52 weeks, which yields a FTE of 0.495. Once the data is entered on Schedule CFR-4, the totals are transferred to other schedules. So the program site personal services totals transfers to the full CFR to Schedule CFR-1, line 16, and on the abbreviated CFRs, it transfers to DMH-1, line 6. The total agency administration personal service expense transfers to Schedule CFR-3, line 1 on a full CFR. Next, we'll go over Schedule CFR-4A, in which the contracted direct care and clinical personal services are reported for your staff. To complete this schedule, click the Add button, select the state agency followed by the program and site from the drop-down menus, click the Add button and select a position title code and enter the annual hours paid and amount paid. Schedule 4A is completed for a full submission type CFR. Position title code series 200 and 300 are reported on this schedule. Contracted staff include individuals that are not issued a W-2 by the provider agency. As with Schedule CFR-4, a complete list of position title codes can be found in Appendix R of the CFR manual. The hours paid amount paid cannot be left blank. And the total contracted direct care and clinical PS carries forward to Schedule CFR-1, line 35. Next, we'll go over Schedule CFR-1, program site data. This schedule is found in a full CFR submission type. The revenue and expenses are completed on an accrual basis of accounting. Note there are 3 sections to complete in this schedule. The first is a general information section, which is comprised of lines 1 through 14. Note that some lines are grayed out, which is an indicator that the data is being transferred forward from another CFR schedule. To start to complete the schedule, select the state agency, the program and site from the drop-down menus at the top. Data on lines 1 through 6 and 8 carry forward from the program site definition screen. For Medicaid eligible programs, please make sure to complete line 7A, Medicaid provider agreement number, and enter on line 7B, the national provider ID number. Report the units of service on line 13. The unit of service measurement to be reported for the New York State Agency program can be found in one of 6 appendices, which are Appendices E, F, G, H, HH, and II. It's very important that the provider agency set up their computer systems in advance of preparing their CFR to carefully track the units of service. So when the time comes, the data will be easily and readily available to be reported on the CFR. The units of service for OMH programs are transferred from Schedule OMH-1. While they're in New York State agencies, programs are reported. Report the units of service on 13A, B, and C. 13A is Medicaid fee-for-service units of service. 13B, Medicaid managed care units of service, and 13C, all other units of service. Next, complete the expenses section of the CFR. There are categories of expenses on Schedule CFR-1, and they are personal services, vacation leave accruals, fringe benefits, other than personal services or OTPS, equipment, property, and agency administration. Personal services are carried forward from Schedule CFR-4 to line 16. Vacation leave accruals are reported on line 17, and they are defined as the increase or decrease in vacation accruals from previous year. Mandated fringe benefits are reported on line 18. Examples include unemployment insurance, FICA, workers' comp. Non-mandated fringe benefits such as health insurance, dental insurance, and pension expense are reported on line 19. Costs for maintenance and repairs, as well as expenses related to housekeeping, garbage, and snow removal are reported on line 22. Participant incidentals associated with participant entertainment, recreation, summer camp, clothing, etc. are reported on line 26. Report expensed equipment, which is defined as the cost of all program site and or program administration, non-adaptive equipment purchased during the cost report period with a value of less than $5,000 or a useful life of less than 2 years on line 28. The contracted direct care and clinical PS is carried forward from Schedule CFR-4A and reported in line 35. Costs associated with program supplies, medical supplies, printing, copying, postage, and computer software are reported on line 36. Insurance costs for medical malpractice, vehicle insurance, professional malpractice, general liability, bonding, and costs related to program site and program administration insurance costs are reported on line 39. Note, do not report expenses related to equipment or property on this line. If you find that in the OTPS section, your expense cannot be reported on one of the predefined lines, there is an other line, which is line 40. To enter an expense on this line, there is an icon that you click in the cell, and the line detail box pops up. And then you have the option of reporting additional expenses either on the predefined lines, or you have the option of adding additional lines. This next slide depicts an example where expenses are reported on line 40, which is the other OTPS line, which should have more appropriately been reported on other lines. So for example, rubbish removal in the amount of $3,999 would have been better reported on line 22, repairs and maintenance, and printing costs of $1,227 would have been more appropriately reported in line 36, supplies and materials non-household. So there are other lines for miscellaneous items for OTPS, equipment and property categories of expenses. The information is entered on these other lines on a line details box. Expenses over $1,000 must be individually reported, and expenses less than $1,000 may be grouped together on a predefined line, all items less than $1,000 each. And as a reminder, do not report items on line 40 OTPS other that should be reported on a specifically defined line in the OTPS section. Bad debt expense is reported on the CFR as a line expense and then backed out as a non-allowable expense. On Schedule CFR-1, it's reported as an expense on line 40 and backed out as non-allowable on line 66. On Schedule CFR-2, column 9, it's reported on line 4 and backed out as non-allowable on line 8. On Schedule CFR-3, it's reported as an expense on line 17 and backed out as non-allowable on line 41. There is an FAQ on the topic of bad debt expense in section 8.0 of the CFR manual if you would like to review it. Certain assets are depreciated on Schedule CFR-1, include vehicle depreciation reported on line 44, equipment depreciation on line 45, the depreciation of building assets reported on line 51, and the depreciation of building/land improvements reported on line 52. All items with an individual cost of $5,000 or more and a useful life of 2 or more years must be depreciated. Appendix O of the CFR manual has additional guidance on the depreciation and amortization rules that a provider should follow for reporting on the CFR. So non-allowable expenses or costs are reported on line 66. This is a line detail box that you select and an icon and the box pops up. Negative numbers cannot be entered in this line detail box of line 66. Appendix X of the CFR manual has a list of non-allowable expenses. And on the CFR, related party expense transactions are reported below of cost or fair market value. Any excess above and beyond this must be reported as not allowable. And the next slide shows an example of the line detail box for line 66, which is the non-allowable expense line of Schedule CFR-1. To add a line, click the Add button, enter a description of the expense, the line number where the expense is reported on the schedule, CFR-1, and the amount of the expense that is not allowable. Click Save, and then close the box. Next, we'll complete the revenue section of the CFR. Report participant fees on line 69, which are revenues received from program participants in excess of SSI and SSA, which includes self-pay and co-pays. Report Medicaid fee-for-service revenue on line 72A and Medicaid managed care revenue on line 72B. Report private third-party health insurance revenue on line 74. Report federal grants on line 79. There are many predefined entries on this line. They include entries for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and predefined lines for Paycheck Protection Program, which you're instructed to report the amount of the PPP loan that was forgiven, record as revenue or as a gain on an extinguishment of debt. Also report FEMA grants, grants from the Federal Communications Commission, such as telehealth grants that may have been awarded to your agency during the COVID-19 pandemic. Also report federal tax credits that are reported as revenue on your agency's financial statements, so they should also be reported as revenue on the CFR. Some examples include the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act, the expanded FMLA, and the Employee Retention Credit, which is refundable. On line 80, report state grants. Report grants received from your state agencies other than the 4 CFR report agencies, OMH, OPWDD, OASAS, and State Ed. There are a number of predefined entries here for New York State agencies. As a reminder, you do not report aid to localities or state aid funding on the state grant line. That is reported on the net deficit funding line on Schedule CFR-1, line 93. Report Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, or SNAP, on line 82. This applies to the OASAS and OPWDD state agencies only. And report prior period rate adjustments for OPWDD programs on line 86. Net deficit funding is reported on lines 93, 103. This includes state aid contracts directly with the DMH agency or local contracts been awarded through the local government unit. Report other revenue on line 94. Some examples include closely allied entity revenue for OASAS, for OMH safety net payments, and VAP Medicaid revenue. For OPWDD, assistive supports revenue, revenue for non-Medicaid eligible individuals under predefined OPWDD state paid. On line 97, report the provision for bad debts revenue deduction. This is the provision for bad debts as a deduction from revenue, provided the revenue was not reported net of the provision for bad debts. The presentation of this provision for bad debts on the CFR should be consistent with the presentation of the provider's audited income statement. Note that there are miscellaneous items that are reported on the other lines for the revenue section, GAAP adjustments to revenues, and the non-GAAP adjustments to revenue categories. Revenues are entered on the other lines through a line details box. Revenue items greater than 1,000 are reported separately. Revenue items less than 1,000 may be grouped together and report on the predefined line all items less than $1,000 each. And next, we'll be transferring you to Ken, who will be your next presenter.
Thank you, Michelle. This is Ken Glenmeyer again, and I'm representing OPWDD. I will be going over CFR-2, CFR-2A, and CFR-3. On the screen right now, you see a snapshot of CFR-2, agency's fiscal summary. Most of these columns are automatically calculated except for column 9. This column is the only interval field on this schedule. Data is from columns 2 through 8. They carry forward from DMH1. Column 1 is calculated by the software. It's just the sum of columns 2 through 9. And then column 1, 7, 9, and 10 should match the respective categories in your financial statements. If there are discrepancy between the CFR-2 and your financial statements, it should be explained through the input on the reconciliation page. CFR-2 is required for full and abbreviated CFRs only, is not required for Article 28 abbreviated or many abbreviated CFRs. The CFR-2 schedule is used to capture total expenses and revenues that are attributable to the service provider as a whole. Column 9 is used to report the expenses and revenues for the provider's agency's activities that are not listed in columns 2 through 8. This is an agency-wide schedule, and then also on page 30 of the sample that was provided would show the CFR-2. Also on reported on column 9 is expenses and revenues are related to fundraising and special events, realized gains and losses, management services expenses provided to another provider agency on an ongoing basis. Fundraising and fundraising special events are not considered agency administrative expenses and cannot be reported on CFR-3. It is expected that the CFR reporting on fundraising and special events will match the reporting in your agency's financial statements. Operating expenses reported on CFR-2 are used to distribute agency administrative expenses between the CFR reporting programs. Operating expenses include personal services, vacation leave accruals, fringe benefits, and OTPS, less raw materials. The reconciliation is not required if the CFR reporting period and the financial statement period are different. So that means it is required when the reporting periods of the CFR and the financial statements are the same. A detailed reconciliation must be submitted with the CFR if they're the same. Page 80 on the sample provided gives an example of the reconciliation page. Governmental entities, Article 28 abbreviated CFR filers and mini abbreviated filers are not required to complete the reconciliation. Also for a required reconciliation, the amount calculated as the difference in the worksheet should be less than $100 in order to pass validation, which will show on the next page. So right here, the reconciliation of expenses is the first tab on this. Line 1, you report the sum of total expenses and total losses as reported in the financial statements. Line 2, you report the expenses and losses included in the CFR-2 that were not included in the financial statements. Then line 3, report the expenses and losses included in the financial statements that were not included in the CFR-2. The window on the right, CFRS line detail, will allow you to enter specific items. Basically, the difference at the bottom should be 0, but in order to pass validation, as mentioned before, it should be less than 100. It has to be less than 100. On the next tab, it's the same situation as the expense side. Click on the reconciliation of revenues and gains tab at the top to fill out the revenue section. Line 1, report the total sum of the total revenues and total gains as reported in the financial statements. Line 2, additions, report the revenues and gains included in CFR-2 that were not included in the financial statements. Line 3, subtractions, report the revenues and gains included in the financial statements that were not included in the CFR-2. And the same on the right-hand side, the CFRS line details, you could click in and do individual detailed items. Common reconciling items may be reported as additions or subtractions in the reconciliation schedule are as follows. Elimination of intercompany expenses and revenues. Depreciation differences, differing allowable depreciation methods have been reported in CFR and statement of activities expense in the financial statements. Report any other item differences between the financial statements and the CFR that are not reported as adjustments or non-allowable costs on CFR 1 or 3. The description should be added with any items reported here. And then also rounding, any remaining differences between expenses reported in the financial statements and the CFR should be reported on this line. The CFR-2A is a very useful schedule when conducting financial analysis for the state agencies. If financials are required to be submitted, this must be completed. Basically, the schedule requires you to copy in information from your audited financials and answer a few additional questions to help each agency with their financial analysis. Instructions for completing the CFR-2A can be found in Section 14 of the CFR manual. So this is part of the CFR-2 schedule that requires specific items from the balance sheet and financial position. This information should agree to the financial statements provided with your submission. The information is very important as it helps us with the understanding of the financial strengths, weaknesses of our providers. This part of the schedule includes information from your statement of activities and income statement. It also includes other sections such as operating capital. This is to provide us with detail of any line of credits your organization might have in outstanding balances. Restructuring, conversion of debt. It's, pretty straightforward. Did you convert any debt from short-term to long-term? Debt management. Are you guys meeting all your covenants? If not, do you have a waiver from your creditor? And lastly, going concern. Did auditors indicate on their financial or your audited report that there's a going concern? If so, mark yes here. CFR-3, agency administration. Agency administration consists of the costs associated with the overall direction of the agency, general record keeping and financial management, governing board activities, and public relations, excluding those costs associated with the fundraising and special events. During identification of specific expenses is the preferred method for charging expenses to the various functions. Further, indirect costs are those activities or services that benefit more than one project or activity and may require to be allocated. In this case, the allocation must be reasonable, consistent, and reviewed by management. Some examples include time studies, square footage, actual use, or percentage of direct cost. Proper documentation should always be retained when regarding the methods used. We would also suggest that you read Appendices I and K in the CFR manual. Also, total agency administration costs for the entire provider agency are reported on a single CFR-3 schedule when completing a full CFR. Abbreviated CFR filers complete the agency administration worksheet in lieu of a CFR-3. For samples, this is on pages 32 and 33, and it's also for full CFR only. CFR-3 agency administration continued. It's a 3-tab data entry screen, as you can see on the sample provided, with personal services, fringe benefits, OTPS, and equipment, property, and ratio value. These lines are very similar to CFR-1. This slide represents the different expense categories that will be found on CFR-3. Personal services, vacation leave accruals, fringe benefits, OTPS, equipment, property, parent agency administration allocation. And we also wanted to just highlight too that fundraising and fundraising special event costs are not to be reported on CFR-3. They are to be reported in full on CFR-2, column 9. If parent agency administration allocation is reported on line 38, documentation of the administration allocation must be sent with the certification schedules. This must include total parent agency costs, total allocated costs to each of the subordinate agencies, and the basis used for the allocation. Section 15 of the CFR manual was revised to provide additional guidance on reporting parent agency administration allocation on CFR-3, line 38. Line 6, audit, legal, and accounting includes the cost of other accounting services such as payroll services and CFR audit costs. Line 14 is contracted personal services such as management consulting services, IT support, and more. Items with cost in excess of $5,000 must be listed in a worksheet separately by description and amount. Items costing less than $5,000 may be aggregated and listed as all items less than $5,000. Just another note on costs to develop internal use software during the application development stages that were capitalized are not included on line 14. For more clarity on that topic, we would refer you to US GAAP codification accounting standards topics 350-40 and 350-50. Line 16 includes insurance general. Insurance costs for general liability, bonding, professional malpractice, vehicle or other insurance costs related to agency administration. We do not want you to include insurance expenses related to equipment or property on this line. This is a screenshot of the equipment and property tab in CFR-3. This The OTPS equipment and property categories each have an other line for miscellaneous items. Information is entered through a line details box. Details are required for individual items costing $1,000 or more. Individual items costing less than $1,000 may be grouped together as all items less than $1,000 each. Note, if the total of the grouped items is excessive, you may be asked for a detailed breakdown. Right. Line 41, adjustments to non-allowable costs. You would enter the description, line number, and amount of all the non-allowable expenses reported in any line of the CFR-3 in the lines detailed box. You refer to Appendix X for some, but not all non-allowable costs. Report the amount in excess of actual cost or fair market value for all administrative-related party transactions disclosed on the CFR-5. Also, no amounts less than $0 should be reported here, so no negative amounts in this line. After all that, line 42 is the amount to be allocated using the ratio value method. Lastly, this is a screenshot that represents the ratio value tab of CFR-3. All data elements on this screen are populated by the software. The calculated values are carried forward to CFR-1, 2, and NYS. As mentioned, the software completes all the calculations for you for the ratio value allocation. The ratio value method uses operating costs of the program sites as the basis of the allocation. Operating costs consist of personal services, vacation leave accruals, fringe benefits, and OTPS, less any raw materials. Schedule CFR-3 uses a two-step process to allocate these costs, and we'll go over those steps. So I'm going to go over the two-step process, but I'll probably confuse you, so I would recommend going to section 15 of the CFR manual. At the end of the section, it provides you detail on what is exactly happening in this automatic calculation. But I'll try to go through it for you right now. Step 1, calculation. Total agency operating costs are carried forward from CFR-2, columns 2 through 9, to CFR-3, lines 43 through 50, and are totaled on line 51. Line 51 is carried forward to 53. Line 52 is divided by 53 to develop the 6-digit ratio value factor on line 54. The ratio value factor is applied to the operating costs on CFR-3, lines 43 through 50, to calculate each funding source's share of agency administration costs, and the allocation is displayed on lines 55 through 62. Hope you got all that. On step 2 calculation, the step 2 ratio value allocation is done within the New York State agency shares assigned in step 1, allowing additional specified program types to be exempted. The step 2 exempted programs are for OPWDD program code 0190 and OMH program codes 0860, 0870, 0920, 1230, 1690, 1910, 2740, 2850, 2860, 2980, 6910, 6920, 8810, and programs with a program code index, which is a startup. Adjusted ratio value factors are displayed then on lines 71 through 77. So that was complicated. If you guys are, want to tie into numbers, I definitely would recommend going to section 15 of the manual to read exactly, the steps process. It's at the end of the section 15. This screenshot is the agency administration worksheet for abbreviated filers. This is not included in your sample. The agency administration must still be calculated using the ratio of value method. The abbreviated filers would just enter total agency administration expenses on line 8, which is highlighted. And then just the software does the rest. Some final thoughts on agency administration. All agencies have agency administration expenses. Agency administration expenses need to be distributed to all activities fairly. Ratio of value is the required method used to allocate agency administration expenses on the core reports. And then also ratio of value is based on the operating costs. In calculating expected administrative and overhead expenses, hospitals should use the most recent available allocation percentages from the step down derived from the latest or the last ICR submitted to Office of Health Systems Management as per Appendix Y. For more information on the CFR-3 schedule, please see section 15 of the CFR manual. For more information on agency administration in general, please see Appendix I, section 42 of the CFR manual, and then also please refer to Appendix T for more information on how to calculate agency administration on an abbreviated CFR. Thank you, and now we'll be handing it off to the next speaker.
Hi, this is Paul Green from New York State Office of Addiction Services and Support. We're going to be talking about the CFR-5, 6, and the DMH-1. The CFR-1, 2, and 3, and 4 that we've already discussed are all interrelated. If you put a number on the CFR-4, it'll show up on the CFR-1, and if you put a number on a 3, it'll be affected by the 2 and show up on the 1 and such. Well, the CFR-5 and the CFR-6 are standalone schedules. So if you put a number on the CFR-5 or CFR-6, you don't have to worry that's going to skew your numbers back on the CFR-1 or the CFR-3, okay? So the 5 and the 6 are basically informational documents. So the CFR-5, transactions with related organizations or individuals. It's required for submissions with full abbreviated and mini abbreviated, but not Article 28 abbreviated. The CFR-5 schedule is used to report all transactions, including compensation between the reporting entity, its affiliates, principal owners, managements, and members of their immediate families, and any other party with which the reporting entity may deal when one party has the ability to significantly influence management or operating policies of the other. So there's two things to take away from here. One, there's a relationship. It may be a personal relationship, a family member, or it may be a business relationship, such as an affiliate. But two, they have to have the ability to significantly influence management or operating policies. Okay? So what we're looking for here is an example of an executive director hiring a relative and basically them having the ability to influence their decision making. Okay. If you do not know if you have any related parties that need to be reported, you should speak with the executive staff, and also you can consult with your financial statements because they're usually listed in the notes section of your financial statements. The important thing here is if you have these related party transactions, you want to report them, okay? Because if you don't report them, then it looks like maybe you're hiding something. So this starts off with two questions, question number 1 and 2. The first one is, during the reporting period, were there any payments to a related organization or individual associated with the provider? If the answer is no, there were no payments to a related organization or individual, then you move on to question number 2. And this one does not include SED. It's just the agencies besides SED. During the reporting period, were there any transactions with the related organization or individual from which the service provider received any financial aid or assistance, or to which the service provider provided financial aid or assistance? This would be, an example of this would be a loan. If a loan was given to the executive director or a loan was received from the executive director. But again, if the answer is no to both of these questions, you would just check off the box, and then you'd be done, and you would go on to the CFR-6. Okay. However, if the answer is yes to either of these questions, you have to continue further into the CFR-5. So by selecting yes to the first question, you did make a payment to a related party. We're going to ask you to fill out section B, which says what was the transaction. So you would start by saying the program that was affected, the description of the transaction, the name of the individual, the relationship, and this is a drop-down box. They'll give you choices to choose from, and then the amount of the transaction. Okay. Most common transactions are row 1, leasing of space or rent, or 2, salary and fringe. Okay. So I'll start with salary and fringe first. What you're allowed to expense is fair market value, up to fair market value. Okay. I realize that you also have to go through a process of getting bids and things to that effect. So I'm not going to get into that right this second. But you are, for salary, you're allowed to expense up to fair market value. So you can hire a related party. You could hire a sister-in-law, and as long as you're paying her the same amount that you would pay somebody else in that position, then the full amount will be allowable. So if you pay her $10,200, well, the allowable amount is $10,200, and there's column 9. There's no adjustments to be made. Okay. If you paid your related party more than fair market value, if fair market value was only $8,200, then there would be an adjustment of $2,000. As I said, the CFR-5 is a standalone document. So if there is an adjustment to be made, you have to remember to go back and make that adjustment. Okay. So for most things, it's fair market value. Now, for leased space, if you rent space from a related party, it's the lower of fair market value or the related party's actual cost. Okay? So in this particular case, you lease space from an agency and you paid them $68,628 in rent. Okay? However, the allowable cost, and we determine that in section C, turns out to be only $67,000. Therefore, there's an adjustment of $1,000. Okay? And again, you would have to remember to go back to the CFR-1 under that program 2100 and put in a $1,000 entry for non-allowable expense. Okay? So if you're renting for a related party, which is fine, but you're limited to the lower of the fair market value or their actual costs. So section B is where you would report the transaction, and then section C is where you would figure out what their cost is. Okay? So in row 1 of section C for program 2100, the related party had actual costs of $10,000 depreciation, $25,000 interest, $8,500, and other, and it only added up to $67,620. Okay, so it could even be worse if they have actually owned that building for a long time and they don't have any mortgage interest. So it's something to consider when you are renting space from a related party. It's the lower of fair market value or the related party's actual costs. Okay, keep that in mind. And any adjustments, any non-allowable amount, you have to remember to go back to the correct schedule and enter it. And if it was for a program, you'd go to the CFR-1, line 66, and if it was for an administrative, you go to the CFR-3, line 41. Okay. And this is a screenshot of back at the CFR-1, line 66, and in the drop-down details box, adjustment to lease from line 49, $1,000. So $1,000 of the rent is not being allowed because it was to a related party. So the question number 2 is asking, report each related party individual from which the service provider received any financial aid or assistance, or to which the service provider provided any financial aid and assistance. If you answered yes to that, then you have to complete section D, and this is where you'd put in the name of the related party, the address, the type of financial support, to or from, and the funding amount. Again, an example of that would be if you loaned money to the executive director or the executive director loaned money to your agency. Okay. So that's a CFR-5. It's important to complete it and keep that in mind. Now, the CFR-6, Governing Board and Compensation Summary. CFR-6 schedule is to be completed by service providers funded by all CFR reporting agencies. It's used to report compensation provided to the governing board, all employees under position title code 601, 602, and 603, all employees earning over $125,000, and the 5 highest paid independent contractors earning over $50,000. It is required for submissions with full and abbreviated, but not for Article 28 abbreviated or mini abbreviated CFRs. Okay. The first question, question number 1, must be answered yes or no. And the question is, do any employees of your agency also serve on the governing board, the governing authority, which is your board of directors? If yes, please detail of the employee name and the 3-digit position title code. So as a not-for-profit, generally the answer to this question is going to be no. Your employees do not sit on the board of directors. They may sit in for meetings to stay informed, but when it comes time for voting, they would not have a vote. However, if you are a for-profit, then this probably would pertain to you. If it is, you select yes, and then the drop-down box appears, and you would click add, and you would put in the employee name and a position title code. Okay. Section 2 includes compensation paid to individuals in their capacity as officers. So here it says, list the names of all the individuals who receive compensation as board officers, members of the board, or such. So again, a not-for-profit would most likely not be having any input here, all right? This would be money that you'd be paying to your board of directors, and generally the board of directors are volunteering out of the goodness of their heart, so they're not being paid. Now, they might be being reimbursed for expenses, travel, and such, but reimbursement does not meet the definition of compensation. Okay, so for for-profits, you may be completing this, and then you would move on to Section 3. Section 3 is about the highest paid employees of your agency. all employees reported under position title code 601, 602, and 603, regardless of their total annualized salary, must be reported, and all employees earning in excess of $125,000. Okay. So here's a screenshot of Section 3. Your first row is your 601, your second row is your 602. So those both have to be listed because they're 601 and 602, but they're also over 125,000. The last row is your 603, and you'll see that they were only at 85,000, so they do not meet the 125,000, but they do meet the fact that they are 601, 602, or 603, so they have to be reported. Okay. What else is in here that's interesting? There is a 604 for $112,000. Okay, so you're saying, well, that's not over 125. Why does that need to be listed? Because we're going by the annualized salary, and in this case, the FTE was only 0.85. They'd been hired late in the year, so they only worked 85% of the year. Had they worked a full year, they would have 131,000. They'd be over the 125. Therefore, they need to be reported. Okay. So that's something to consider, annualized salary. And finally, this 521 had 110,000, which the annualized salary, it was a 1 FTE, so it was 110,000. But then they also had a contracted payment of 20,000, brings them over to 125,000. Again, needs to be reported. So CFR-3 is all about the compensation of the highest paid employees. I'm sorry, going back to the CFR-3, there's one more thing here. Column 9, other benefits. Okay. In this particular case, there's a $1,200 fee being paid for an automobile for the executive director. Okay. It's for commuting back and forth to work. You're welcome to pay that expense. We're just not going to reimburse for that expense, okay? So commuting miles is not considered an allowable expense, so you could report it here as another benefit, and then you would, again, because this is not connected to anything, you would have to remember to go back to the CFR-3, line 41, and deduct it as a non-allowable expense, okay? And this is a crosswalk showing you where you'd go back to the CFR-3, line 41, adjustments for non-allowable, which is a total of 16,000, and then a drop-down box shows Mary Reynolds auto lease, $1,200 plus the bad debt expense of 15,000 equals the total $16,000. Finally, we have Section 4, which requests information on the 5 highest paid independent contractors providing any type of service to the provider agency. They're generally accounting, legal, medical, consulting, and other. Okay. If you select other, a detailed box appears, which allows you to type in what that is. The threshold for Section 4 is $50,000, and again, we're only looking for 5. And they can be independent contractors, maybe individuals or firms. Okay. So that is the end of the CFR-6. The DMH-1 is a program fiscal summary, and by that I mean it summarizes the information that has been entered already. Okay. So first of all, I'm going to talk about the DMH-1 from the view of a full CFR filer, which a majority of you are. If you've already completed the schedule CFR 1 through 4, those numbers have all transferred over to this DMH-1, and sometimes they've been combined and such. So like on a CFR 1, OTPS, other than personal services, was like 30 lines. But when you get to the DMH-1, it's only 1 line. So the DMH-1 is a summary. It's easier to read, but yet it still has the main totals. Okay. But all the lines on the DMH1 are gray. There's nothing that you can change on that DMH1. If you want to change the number, you have to go back to the CFR1, fix it there, and then it will correct itself. Okay. We also have to go back to what was said kind of in the beginning of the presentation. The CFR is actually two reports. The beginning of the CFR, CFR1 through DMH1, are the core reports, and they're used for fiscal analysis. Okay. We compare provider to provider, we compare county to county, we compare year to year. This is why we require everybody use the same accounting system, accrual-based. We also require that you distribute your agency admin the same way through ratio value, and we also require that you depreciate things, because that way we're comparing apples to apples. When you're done with the core reports, and the R1 department is using that for fiscal analysis to set budgets and things to that effect. There's also the second part of the CFR, which is the claim. The claim is used to reconcile your account. Okay. As you know, if you're getting state aid, you submitted a budget in the beginning, which was an estimate of what you thought was going to happen during the year. We then gave you advance payments towards these programs, okay, state aid funded. Now at the end of the year, now that you know what's happened, you submit your claim, and then we reconcile what we gave you against your claim, okay? So because there's two different departments, the core report department and the claims department, sometimes they have set different rules and they like things reported differently. So we've already said on the core reporting that we want each program with its site in its own column, okay? But if I had 3 sites for one program, okay, so it's the same program, but it's 3 different sites. Well, the claims department might say something to the effect, they might say, we want you to combine those. Or they might say, we want them to keep them separate. Okay. But the option here is the software gives you the option to combine them if you wish to, and it's done through the index code. The index code is the 2 digits that follow the program code 00, 01, 02. Okay. So if multiple occurrences of a program type have the same index code, the data for that program type will be aggregated into a single column on the DMH1. Okay. So again, if the claims department wants this reported combined, but the core department wants it reported separately, well, the index code is what allows you to make both departments happy. Also, the second speaker note here says, if multiple occurrences of a program type have different index codes. Now, that's an example for OASAS. We would never want you to combine programs on your claim. Therefore, we would want you to use different unique index codes, 00, 01, and 02. And that way they would stay in their own columns. Okay. Once you have completed the DMH1 and you're satisfied with it, it's going to be considered, besides being a summary, it's also going to be a bridge. And whatever you've reported on the DMH1, those are the programs or columns that are going to be reported on the DMH2. Okay. All right. So now, from a perspective of somebody filing an abbreviated CFR, all right, if you were starting out with an abbreviated or Article 28 abbreviated CFR, you would start right at the DMH1. All the lines would be white, so they'd be enterable for you. And it'd be easier. You would not have to fill in the 30 lines of OTPS. You'd only have to fill in the 1 line. But you would follow the same characteristics of the CFR1 reporting, okay? You would have to use full accrual-based accounting, equipment costing $5,000 or more and having a useful life of 2 years or more must be depreciated, and agency admin is distributed through ratio value. Okay. This is the screenshot of the 3 tabs. The first tab is the listing of the expenses, and you can see row 9, other than personal services, is just one number. Okay. There's still adjustments for non-allowable expenses. Then your second tab is your program revenues. And in your program revenues, you'll have other columns, as we've already discussed in the CFR-1, okay? And you'll also have your federal grants column, line 25. And again, that was just, that's where you would report your PPP revenue and your FEMA grants and such. That was all discussed in the CFR-1, okay? Also, you have line 26, your state grants. Again, that's money that you receive from a state agency other than our 6 state agencies, okay? And then your third tab, well, this is your second tab, a screenshot of your program revenues. And your third tab is program adjustments to revenue, okay? And the intent of the third tab is to get down to line 44, which is your net operating costs. And we're going to talk more about your net operating costs tomorrow in the claiming section. But basically, your net operating cost is your total expenses less all your revenues except for your state aid. Okay, so if you had car wash revenue, donation revenue, or Medicaid, Medicare, or such, so it'd be your total expenses less all other revenues except for your state aid. That is your net operating cost. And that's going to be important going forward for the claiming process. So that is the CFR-5, CFR-6, and DMH-1. Okay. Before I hand the microphone back to the host for his closing statements, I just want to point out a couple of quick things. We did send out a copy of a handout and a sample CFR a couple days ago. The handout is basically the presentation, including the speaker notes. If for some reason you did not get it or you lose it, feel free to contact us and we'll be happy to provide it again. We are also here in our respective units. If you have questions when you're doing this CFR, if you need assistance, we're happy to try and help you out. On that note, I will transfer the ball back to the host. Thank you and have a good day.
Well, I know everyone's probably hungry and ready to get off this. We do have some final things to say. So I want to thank you once again for participating in this training. In case you guys did miss the beginning of the seminar, please take time to fill out the post survey after you leave the event. It should pop up right after you close out. It'll help us make these trainings better. These trainings are for you, so we want to make them as best as possible to get you guys the most out of it. Also, this webinar has been recorded and will be posted online shortly. We'll send an email out, and it'll be to all the registered attendees, along with anyone that didn't register. If we have a contact for you, we'll be sending that out. And also the Q&As, they'll be carefully reviewed and the answers will be posted online as soon as possible as well. So if you do have some questions, I'm going to leave the Q&A open for about 5 minutes after this ends. Just get any of your questions in. Our goal is to answer them as best we can and publish them online. Once again, thank you. And this concludes the CFR presentation for session 1.